So back in March, I recorded myself doing the 50 Heads Challenge, which is a challenge created by Ahmed Al-Duri, where you have to draw 50 heads in 10 days. I actually found this challenge to be pretty easy. So the trick is to manage your time. Figure out how much time you can spend every day on this challenge, and then divide that by the amount of heads you're going to be drawing every day. I finished this challenge back in April, and just a couple months later in June, I decided to go back and do it again. But this time, it's round 2 times 2, the 100 Heads Challenge. Day 1. For the 100 Heads Challenge, I thought to myself, why don't I do all the heads in ballpoint pen? That would be like an extra challenge. But for the first day, I decided to ease myself into it a little bit by doing a more forgiving medium. So I did rough sketch in colored pencil and then a cleaner sketch in mechanical pencil. When I did the 50 Heads Challenge, I set a 20-minute timer per head. For the second round, I really did not want to spend double the amount of time on the challenge, so I lowered the time limit to 10 minutes per head. Also, if you're finding it hard to get a head done in a short amount of time, try drawing smaller. Drawing the same thing big versus small is obviously going to take a lot longer. Sometimes it feels like I draw better when I have less time. Like maybe I overthink things and get bogged down on detail or something like that. But definitely a time limit I do think might actually help me. Does anybody else feel like that? Like the drawings you spend less time on are sometimes the nicest ones. Anyway, back to the challenge. For the references, I used the official Pinterest board for this challenge, which you don't need to use. I know that a lot of people don't use it, but I wanted to use it, and I used it for the 50 Heads Challenge as well. So it also just makes it way easier. You don't have to go find heads yourself and stuff like that. Oh, I definitely struggled on this head. It didn't really turn out very good. But, it's better to just move on. I did the best I could, and, I'm still getting mileage out of it. Day 1 turned out pretty good. I didn't find it difficult to draw 10 heads instead of 5. And all the heads turned out pretty good. I feel like it was a good idea to limit it to 10 minutes. And yeah. Day 2. Wow, that synced up with the music perfectly. That was not planned. Anyway, we are now getting into the real stuff, ballpoint pen. I started out drawing very, very lightly. This is usually how I go about drawing. I want to start with a rough sketch of the entire drawing before I go into detail. I don't always do it, but usually that's what I do. It helps make sure that the proportions are good. Ballpoint pen isn't actually that different from pencil. You know how, depending on how much pressure you use, you can make lighter or darker lines, which you can't do with regular ink. The only difference really is that you can erase. And that's not necessarily a con, because not being able to erase forces you to commit to your lines, be more confident, and really think before you make a mark, instead of just aimlessly trying to find the line. A lot of people use ballpoint pen for sketching specifically to improve on those things. I also like the fact that it doesn't smudge. And I know you can use fixative on pencil, but it's just nice that, with ballpoint pen, it can be a little bit cleaner immediately without needing to do anything extra. On this head, along with head 11, I can see that I'm starting to figure out a style that I'll fully kind of have a breakthrough on day 3, so I'll talk about it more at that point. I'm surprised at how good this had turned out, especially since it's a more difficult angle, but I feel like I got it down pretty well. Day 2 went surprisingly well, especially for it being the first day using ballpoint pen. Doing pencil on the first day definitely really helped out. I feel like using that as a warm-up really kind of got me back into the feel of things. I think all the heads turned out fine. Well, except for head 12, but it's a difficult angle and it's not terrible. Day 3. So why exactly am I doing this challenge? Well, one reason is I wanted to improve on drawing heads, especially when I'm drawing in a more cartoony style. Now you might say, if that's the case, then why are you drawing them realistically? And to that I say, good question. Have you ever heard that you gotta learn the rules before you break the rules? That's very much the case. The stuff I don't like about my stylized heads has more to do with the fundamentals than the stylization, if that makes any sense. I don't know how to explain it. But when I learned how to draw the body by doing a lot of figure drawing, it really helped my stylized bodies. So I'm kind of trying to do the same thing with the head. Another thing I'm working on is drawing faster, which you usually start drawing faster the better you get at drawing whatever you're drawing. There is a difference between how fast you draw and how much time you spend on drawing. Like people who are very skilled at drawing, they draw fast, but they might spend more time on a drawing, depending on what the drawing is. I also decided to do the challenge because I thought it would be a great thing to start off with for the channel. Something that people know and something that I know and I wanted to do anyway, so why not? So this is the head where I kind of had a bit of a breakthrough. With this head, I did something kind of interesting with the lines. They're very delicate looking. I also kept things simple, like not getting too detailed and heavy-handed. I especially like the way the eyes and eyebrows look. This is definitely a style I want to explore more. Now, I didn't do it on all the rest of the heads. I did try to do it on certain heads where I thought it made sense, but obviously this is a new style which I haven't really gotten into the habit of. Day 4. I can see that I'm kind of going back and forth with the style. Like in certain places I do the delicate line style and then I kind of revert back to what I usually do. But as I explore more with the style, I'll definitely develop it more and kind of figure out exactly how I should incorporate it and stuff like that. Like this head, I'm kind of doing it. It's not perfect, but it's definitely getting there. You know, in the future, I plan on doing this challenge again because I have a lot of other ideas of how I can go about it. Like picking my own photos of probably famous people and doing stylized heads instead of realistic ones, kind of like caricatures. And that would work really well with the whole famous people thing. It would be a really good way to practice stylization, capturing likeness, and also figuring out an art style. Drawing faces you know is way more difficult than drawing strangers because you know what that person looks like. So any mistake is very obvious. You know, I was thinking that because it's famous people, it would be really funny to draw the heads in jars, you know, Futurama style. But then I was thinking that that would really limit the angles I could do. So I'd probably just do it as the thumbnail because I like the idea of doing more fun, creative thumbnails, like the one I did for this video. It's kind of like its own illustration, its own piece of art, I guess. You know, it serves a purpose outside of just being a thumbnail. Another idea could be drawing money from around the world because, you know, they're portraits, so that would work out. Or maybe a theme like every person who's won a certain competition, or anything where I can find like something there's 100 people of. Day 5. For day 5, there were a lot of heads that had a lot more shadows going on. So I tried to simplify them as much as possible. Like, instead of getting all spotty with the shadows, which is very easy to do, I tried to figure out what the big shapes were and like block that in first. I'm not saying that I succeeded in this, but I was definitely keeping that in mind and trying to do that as much as I could. There was a lot of pressure drawing Jimin because it's a face people know, so it's a lot more important that you get the likeness down perfectly because people are going to know if something is inaccurate. For him, I went with the delicate line style. It just makes sense to use that style when you're drawing a head that doesn't have any harsh shadows and also, you know, like a younger person, so they don't have any wrinkles and stuff like that. There's not a lot of detail, so it's easier to simplify things. The head I'm drawing right now, I think I did a good job blocking in the big shadow shapes. I squinted my eyes to be able to see the values more clearly in the reference. I've got a lot of different ideas for this channel. The next series of videos I'm going to do have already been planned. I'm going to do another challenge, but this one isn't necessarily challenging. So back in school, I drew the 9 muses, but my interpretation of them. So it was kind of like a character design kind of thing. And I thought it would be fun to redraw them in kind of like a draw this again challenge. I don't know if it's even called a challenge actually. So that's what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna make it 9 separate videos so that I don't need to speed it up that much and I can spend more focus on each individual drawing. I love watching people do the draw this again. It's so interesting to see how much a person has improved. And right now, I want to do videos of things that I like and I like watching. It'll be a good introduction to my more cartoony style and also some of my old art. Day 6. With the shading, I went with cross-hatching and hatching. Cross-hatching is when you have lines going in one direction and then you overlap those lines with lines going in a different direction, while hatching is just lines going in one direction. I personally prefer hatching. I just think it looks cleaner. But I did do a lot of cross-hatching anyway, just because it's kind of a habit, but I'm trying to be more conscious of not doing it as much. I also decided to keep all the hatching lines straight. You can do more curved lines to kind of follow the form, but personally, I don't really like how that looks, at least not on smaller drawings. It can look fine on bigger drawings. Or if the lines are really fine and you can only really see them close up, it can work as well. You know, like the portraits you see on money. I've been thinking about other videos I could do for this channel, and now would be a great time to talk about it, since I do need to fill out this entire video. It's a lot of minutes to talk. Like, for example, one of the ideas was to make videos where every video is dedicated to a different element on the periodic table. And in the video, I would design a character to represent that element. But instead of it being like, oh, they're a humanized version of this element, it would be more like they are a human, but they can control that element. You know, like how usually people control fire, water, earth, air, and they call that elements, but this would be a cool way to do like actual elements, you know? And I think it would be a really fun way to incorporate a little bit of science, because that is something I want to do. I want to incorporate other stuff along with the drawing, so it's not just me drawing. Like I want something more like, I don't know if you'd call like edutainment or something like that, but I like videos that do that. So yeah, I think it would be cool to do something like that as well. Side note, I really like how a lot of the drawings on this particular page turned out. Day 7. Getting back to what I was saying about future videos, I also want to make videos where I redraw screenshots from Star Trek the original series, because I've always loved the colors and lighting in that show, and I feel like a good way to emulate that style is doing studies and trying to really figure out exactly what it is I like about it. This is actually related to the 100 Heads challenge, because originally the plan was to do 100 Star Trek heads instead of just 100 of the official heads. But because I wanted to do it in color, it was just going to take too long. I wasn't going to be able to get it done in 10 days. So I decided to do something more achievable and then do the Star Trek thing as its own thing without a time limit. And while we're on the topic of Star Trek, the original series, I would love to do a video where I just talk about the art direction in that show, because I feel like it's so underrated. I feel like usually all I hear is negative stuff about like, oh, it's so obviously filmed on a set. But I have a lot of good things to say about it. A lot of things I don't think people have really thought about. Well, I'm sure people have talked about it, but the point is that a lot of people haven't talked about it. Like, I've never heard anybody talk about it, and it's definitely not the popular opinion. Let's now move on and talk about day 7. The head I just drew, which I'm guessing was a sculpture of Gandalf, I very much failed on. I messed up on the eyes, and there's not a lot you can do to fix it when you're using ballpoint pen because you can't erase. So it's kind of just about adding more ballpoint pen in strategic ways. But I mean, I think I salvaged it as much as I could, but it's definitely not a great head. I like how the orc turned out. I like the first head I drew on this day. I'm definitely starting to reach a turning point, you might say, in this challenge. Day 8. As I was saying, the turning point has arrived. So towards the end of a challenge, a lot of the heads are sculptures and like older heads, more mythological heads, more detailed heads. A lot of heads that could be more time consuming, not necessarily more difficult to draw, mind you, just more time consuming. At this point, I feel like I had totally abandoned the whole delicate line style, and I was going in pretty heavy with the cross-hatching. You know, something I've noticed looking back at the time lapse is I really like how the rough sketches look. You know, the sketches before I kind of go in and refine stuff with a more like darker line. The rough sketches a lot of times might even look nicer than some of the finished heads. I should try to figure out a way to kind of incorporate some of that into my more finished stuff. But, you know, that's something I can look into later on. But I really want to see if I can. I need to note that down along with the delicate line thing as something I want to incorporate. In a way, it kind of is a little bit reminiscent of the delicate lines because it's simple and it's like very fine lines. It's not too heavy. I don't know. Yeah, looking back at things, I really like the sketches. Like, I really like how it looks. Don't get me wrong, I do like how a lot of the finished heads look on this page, but even though the cross-hatching is fine, I like it, I feel like it's too much. Like, I don't want to do like, I feel like it's a bit too heavy. And I do prefer, as I said before, hatching over cross-hatching. So I need to kind of control that a bit. I do like the Frankenstein. I feel like I held back a little bit on the cross-hatching, which was good. Day 9. I really liked this sculpture to the point where I actually drew it twice. There were 2 different angles and I just couldn't choose because I liked both the angles. This head is on the thumbnail for a reason. I actually did this with a couple of the sculptures. Most of the sculptures that had lots of different angles, I just couldn't choose which angle I liked the most, so I just did all of them if it was a sculpture I really liked. This head, I feel like I got the rendering right, but the drawing is a little bit off. I can see that now. It's like the proportions are a little off, but you know, it's fine. So like I mentioned before, a lot of the heads now are sculptures and they're very detailed, or at least I'm making them very detailed. For this challenge, I had the time limit of 10 minutes per head. This was to keep the amount of time I was spending on this challenge every day to a reasonable time. But for a lot of these heads and the heads on the day before, I actually ended up going over 10 minutes. Some of the heads were 10 minutes, while others got up to about 20 minutes. This was mainly because of the excessive amount of cross-hatching and rendering I was doing. You know, I was feeling fine with this challenge. I wasn't feeling burnt out or anything. But I feel like around this time, this day, maybe the day before a little bit, was where I was really starting to feel like, okay, the challenge can end. And it was definitely because I was spending more time on the individual heads. Head 87, the doll, I really liked how that one was looking early on, but I kind of ruined it. Because all the heads I'd been drawing recently had been very detailed and very heavy-handed, I had kind of gotten into the habit of drawing a lot heavier. So I definitely went way too heavy on head 87, which I really shouldn't have because it was definitely a head that needed a more delicate line. And the eyes was so nice looking, and I ruined it. Day 10. Actually, day 11. So yeah, I ended up being busy on day 10 and had to do this the next day. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to do the challenge in 10 consecutive days, but I did still do it in 10 days. This is probably one of the worst heads I drew the entire challenge. I mean, I guess it's a difficult angle and stuff, but I don't like this head. I liked the first head on this day, but this is probably the weakest day of all the days. I was definitely over it at this point. Spending 20 minutes on heads the last days definitely burnt me out. And I just wanted to get this challenge done and get these heads done as quickly as I could. So I definitely wasn't trying to take my time with them. But at the same time, I still wanted to do the best I could. So like I can't stop myself from still trying to do a good job. But I feel like these heads aren't as great as they could have been. But again, I wouldn't say that terrible heads. I feel like I went way too heavy on these heads, especially since they're not like older people. They're not like super crazy shadows. They're definitely heads that should have been done in a more, or at least could have been done in a more like simplified way. And I should have really tried using the delicate line style more here. So yeah, but again, I just think I was in the habit of doing more heavy-handed stuff. I also made sure to stick to the 10-minute time limit because 20 minutes was just too much. And also I think having 10 minutes helps to prevent me from, overworking the drawing and doing too much cross-hatching. Even though I did definitely still do a bit too much cross-hatching on some of these heads, but, I wanted to just keep it short. If a head isn't finished by the time the 10 minutes is up, well, tough luck. Move on so that you can finish this challenge at a reasonable time. So there we have it, the 100 heads challenge. Completed in 11 days instead of 10, unfortunately. I actually really enjoyed the challenge. I thought it was not that difficult. It was more difficult than the 50 heads challenge, and definitely towards the end I was feeling burnt out, but I feel like that was mainly my own fault for going over the 10-minute time limit. I do think I got better at the head, and also I definitely figured out more the styles I like when it comes to rendering and lines. The biggest breakthrough to me is probably the delicate line style. I definitely want to try to incorporate that more in other stuff. So I guess I'll be moving on to other videos, specifically the ones I mentioned earlier. But this channel won't only be an art channel. That's just the videos I want to start out with. But I do have other art-related stuff planned, like just to do with talking about different media and maybe even doing some history stuff and some science stuff. I don't know. We'll see. I'm just really gonna make whatever videos I want. You know, I'm just glad I'm done with this voiceover. No joke, recording this voiceover might actually have been more challenging than doing the 100 heads challenge. But that's just me, I guess.